The snow had been falling for 3 days straight over Pine Ridge, Montana. Not the gentle postcard kind that dusts the world in white magic, but the brutal, relentless kind that erases roads, buries landmarks, and turns the familiar into a vast, frozen wilderness where even sound gets lost. The wind howled through the valley like a wounded animal, carrying with it the scent of pine and ice. The temperature had dropped to -15, and forecasters warned it would hit -25 by nightfall. In weather like this, exposed skin froze in minutes. In weather like this, people died. 10-year-old Emma Grace Shepard stood at the frosted window of the Pine Ridge Community Shelter, her breath forming small clouds against the glass. Her fingertips traced patterns in the condensation, small hearts and stars that disappeared as quickly as she drew them. Outside, the world had turned monochrome: white snow, gray sky, dark trees bending under the weight of ice. Emma was small for her age, with honey-blonde hair that fell in tangled waves past her shoulders and eyes the color of stormy seas. Her clothes were layered, donated items from the shelter's charity bin. A too-large sweater, jeans with patches on the knees, wool socks that bunched inside boots held together with duct tape. She wore a faded red scarf around her neck, the only thing she had left from before. Before the accident. Before the fire that took her parents. Before she became nobody's daughter. That had been 8 months ago. 8 months of foster homes that didn't work out, social workers with kind eyes and tired voices, and finally, this shelter on the edge of Pine Ridge, where she'd been staying for the past 3 weeks. The staff were good people, but overwhelmed. There were too many broken families, too many children with nowhere to go. Beside Emma, pressed against her leg with the loyal patience of a born protector, sat Ghost. The white German Shepherd was just over 2 years old, with ice-blue eyes and a coat that seemed to glow even in the dim shelter light. He'd found Emma 6 months ago, or maybe she'd found him. It was hard to say who rescued whom. She'd been sleeping behind a gas station in Billings when she heard the whimpering. Ghost had been abandoned, left tied to a dumpster with a note pinned to his collar. Can't afford to keep him, military trained. Good dog. His ribs had shown through his fur, and there was a deep gash on his shoulder, infected and oozing. Emma had used her last $5 to buy antiseptic and bandages. She'd shared her food with him, even when it meant going hungry herself. And Ghost, in return, had become her shadow, her guardian, her only family. Now, as the blizzard raged outside, Ghost lifted his head and whined softly. His ears perked forward, swiveling toward the door. Emma glanced down at him, her hand automatically moving to stroke the thick fur at his neck. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Ghost stood, his body tense, muscles coiled beneath his winter coat. He padded to the door and scratched once, then looked back at Emma with those piercing blue eyes. "We can't go out," Emma said reasonably. "It's too cold." Mrs. Henderson said, "The storm's getting worse." But Ghost whined again, more insistent this time. He paced in a tight circle, then returned to the door, his behavior increasingly agitated. Emma had learned to trust Ghost's instincts. He'd warned her away from dangerous people, led her to safe places, and once pulled her back from a street just seconds before a car ran a red light. If Ghost thought something was wrong, something was wrong. Emma pulled on her worn winter coat, the one with the broken zipper she'd safety pinned shut. She wrapped her scarf tighter and pulled a knitted cap over her ears. From under her cot, she retrieved a small backpack containing everything she owned: a flashlight with dying batteries, a water bottle, a pocket knife her father had given her, and a photograph of her parents on their wedding day. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. She slipped out the side door while Mrs. Henderson was busy with dinner preparations. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. The wind shrieked through the alley behind the shelter, driving snow into her face like tiny needles. Ghost pressed against her side, his body warm and solid. He moved forward with purpose, his nose to the ground, following a trail only he could sense. Emma followed, one hand gripping his collar, the other clutching her coat closed. They moved through the deserted streets of Pine Ridge. The town was shut down, businesses closed, roads empty except for the occasional plow scraping through the accumulation. Street lights created small halos of illumination in the whiteout conditions, but beyond those pools of light, the world disappeared into swirling darkness. Ghost led her past the hardware store, the diner with its darkened windows, the gas station where the sign swung wildly in the wind. They turned onto Old Mountain Road, where the pavement gave way to gravel and then to nothing but packed snow. The forest pressed close on either side, pine trees heavy with ice, branches creaking ominously. Emma's teeth chattered despite her layers. Her fingers and toes had gone numb. She wanted to turn back, to return to the warmth of the shelter, but Ghost pulled forward with single-minded determination. "Ghost, please," she pleaded, her voice stolen by the wind. "It's too far. We have to go back." But the dog surged ahead, breaking into a run. Emma had no choice but to follow, stumbling through knee-deep snow, her legs burning with effort. They climbed a ridge, Ghost's powerful body-breaking trail making it easier for Emma to follow in his wake. And then, at the top of the ridge, Ghost stopped. He barked once, sharp and urgent, the sound carrying through the storm. Emma struggled up beside him, her lungs screaming, her vision blurred with tears from the cold. She followed Ghost's gaze down into a shallow ravine on the other side of the ridge. At first, she saw nothing but snow and shadow. Then her eyes adjusted, and her heart stopped. 3 men lay in the snow at the bottom of the ravine, their bodies partially buried by the storm. They wore dark tactical gear, white with frost and ice. They weren't moving. Emma's first instinct was to run, to flee from whatever violence had brought these men to this frozen grave. But then Ghost began to descend, half running, half sliding, down the slope. And Emma, because she trusted Ghost more than she trusted anything else in the world, followed. The 3 men were arranged in a rough triangle, their backs against each other as if they'd tried to share body heat in their final moments. The snow had drifted around them, creating a shallow depression that offered minimal shelter from the wind. Emma dropped to her knees beside the nearest man, her hands shaking as she brushed snow from his face. He was young, maybe late 20s, with dark stubble covering his jaw and a jagged scar running through his left eyebrow. His skin had a blue-gray tinge that terrified her. His lips were cracked and bloodless. But when she pressed her fingers to his neck, searching for the pulse point like she'd seen in movies, she felt it. Faint, slow, but there. He was alive. "Hey," Emma said, her voice cracking. "Hey, mister, can you hear me?" No response. His eyes remained closed, his breathing so shallow she could barely see his chest move. She turned to the second man. He was older, maybe mid-30s, with close-cropped blonde hair going gray at the temples. A thin layer of ice had formed on his beard. His tactical vest bore a name strip, Carson. Beside it, a small American flag patch and a trident insignia. Emma's father had been in the military. She'd seen that trident before. Navy SEALs. These weren't just any men. These were warriors, and someone had left them here to die. The third SEAL lay slightly apart from the others. He was the biggest of the 3, broad-shouldered and muscular even beneath the layers of tactical gear. His face was turned toward the sky, snowflakes gathering on his closed eyelids. His name strip read Mitchell. Like the others, he had multiple patches on his vest, medals. Emma didn't understand but recognized as signs of honor. Ghost moved between the 3 men, sniffing each one carefully, whining low in his throat. When he reached Mitchell, he lay down beside him, pressing his warm body against the SEAL's side. Emma's mind raced. They were alive, but barely. If she left to get help, they might be dead by the time she returned. But she was just a kid with a dog in the middle of a blizzard. What could she possibly do? Then she remembered something her father had told her once during a camping trip when she'd complained about the cold. "Body heat, Emma Bear," he'd said, pulling her close. "Share your warmth, and you both survive." Emma took off her coat. The cold bit into her immediately, but she didn't hesitate. She draped the coat over the first SEAL's chest, tucking it around him as best she could. Then she removed her scarf and wrapped it around Carson's neck. Her knitted cap went to Mitchell. She was shivering violently now, her teeth chattering so hard she bit her tongue, but she wasn't done. She scooped armfuls of snow and packed it around the three men, creating a crude snow cave, using the insulating properties of the snow itself to protect them from the wind. Ghost watched her work, then seemed to understand. He began to dig, his powerful paws moving snow with impressive efficiency. Together, girl and dog built walls, creating a shelter that blocked the worst of the wind. When she could do no more, Emma crawled into the shelter beside the men. She pressed herself against Carson's side, trying to share her meager body heat. Ghost lay against Mitchell, his thick coat providing vital warmth. Emma pulled out her flashlight and flicked it on. The beam was weak, the batteries nearly dead, but it gave enough light to see the men more clearly. Now that she was close, she could see they weren't just cold, they were injured. The first SEAL, the one with the scared eyebrow, had dried blood crusted around his hairline. Carson's hands were bound behind his back with zip ties, the plastic cutting into his wrists. Mitchell had a dark stain spreading across his left thigh, frozen blood marking a wound that would need immediate attention if he was going to survive. They'd been attacked, restrained, left here to die. And Emma, with nothing but a dying flashlight and a loyal dog, was all that stood between them and death. She fumbled for her water bottle, grateful that she'd kept it inside her coat, where her body heat had prevented it from freezing solid. She uncapped it with trembling fingers and tilted it carefully against the first SEAL's lips. "Please," she whispered. "Please wake up. I can't do this alone." A few drops of water slipped between his cracked lips. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his throat moved, swallowing reflexively. His eyelids fluttered. "That's it," Emma encouraged, her voice shaking with cold and hope. "Come on, stay with me." The SEAL's eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused. They were gray, the color of storm clouds. His gaze wandered, unseeing, before finally landing on Emma's face. His brow furrowed. "Angel?" he rasped, his voice barely audible. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "No, sir, just Emma. But help is coming. You have to hold on." His eyes closed again, but his breathing had deepened slightly. Progress. Emma looked at her flashlight, then at the vast expanse of snow and darkness surrounding them. She had no phone. No way to call for help. The shelter was more than a mile away, and she'd left without telling anyone where she was going. They were trapped in a blizzard with 3 dying Navy SEALs, and nobody knew they were here. Ghost lifted his head and howled, the sound cutting through the storm like a blade. It was the howl of a military working dog, calling for his handler, calling for help, calling for a miracle. Emma pressed her face against Carson's shoulder and whispered a prayer her mother had taught her long ago. "Please, God, send someone. We can't do this alone." The wind howled in response, and the snow continued to fall. 6 hours earlier, Lieutenant Commander Jack Reaper Morrison stood in the operations room of Pine Ridge Naval Special Warfare Training Facility. His arms crossed over his chest, his expression carved from granite. He was 45 years old, built like a tank, with iron-gray hair cut military short and eyes that held all the warmth of a winter sky. On the table before him lay 3 personnel files. Lieutenant Dylan Hart, the scared one, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Carson, and Petty Officer First Class James Mitchell. 3 of the best SEALs in his unit. 3 men he'd trained personally. 3 men who'd discovered something they shouldn't have. "You're certain they found it?" The voice came from behind Morrison, smooth and cold. Morrison didn't turn. They were asking questions, running their own investigation. Hart's always been too smart for his own good. The man stepped into Morrison's peripheral vision. Congressman Walter Drummond looked nothing like the polished politician who appeared on news channels. Here, in the shadows of a classified training facility, He looked exactly like what he was, a man willing to do anything to protect his secrets. This training program generates $30 million a year, Drummond said quietly. Money that funds operations the American public doesn't need to know about. Money that keeps our enemies afraid and our allies in line. Money you skim off the top, Morrison added flatly. Drummond's smile was sharp. We all benefit from the arrangement, Commander. Your men train in the best facilities, with the best equipment. All I ask is that certain financial irregularities remain unreported. Morrison's jaw tightened. He'd made a deal with the devil years ago, telling himself it was for the greater good. The extra funding had saved lives, had made his unit the most elite in naval special warfare. But Hart, Carson, and Mitchell had stumbled onto evidence of the embezzlement scheme, and now Drummond wanted them silenced. There are other ways, Morrison said. Transfer them, separate them, make it impossible for them to coordinate. Too risky. They've already compiled evidence. If they talk, they won't talk. Morrison's voice was steel. These men are loyal. They follow the code. Drummond leaned close, his voice dropping to a whisper. Are you willing to bet your career on that? Your freedom? Because if they expose this, we both go to prison. You for accepting bribes, me for corruption, and every operation we've run for the past 5 years gets scrutinized by people who don't understand what it takes to keep this country safe. Morrison said nothing. His silence was answer enough. Drummond straightened, adjusting his expensive watch. I have a team in place, former contractors. They'll make it look like a training accident. 3 SEALs get lost in a blizzard during a cold weather survival exercise. Tragic, but not suspicious. We recover the bodies in spring, hold a memorial service, and move on. And if the bodies are found sooner, then we ensure there's nothing to find. No evidence of foul play, just 3 heroes who died serving their country. Drummond's eyes were flat. Do we have an understanding, Commander? Morrison stared at the 3 files, at the faces of men he'd taught, men who trusted him, his hands clenched into fists. Yes, he said finally. We have an understanding. 3 hours later, Hart, Carson, and Mitchell were loaded into a helicopter for what they believed was a routine cold weather training insertion. They carried standard survival gear: tents, rations, emergency beacons. They never knew the beacons had been disabled. They never knew the helicopter pilot was working for Drummond. They never knew that when they were dropped on the ridge 20 miles from base, it was meant to be their grave. The 3 SEALs had realized something was wrong within the first hour. Check your beacon, Carson had ordered, his breath fogging in the frigid air. Mitchell pulled the emergency device from his pack, pressed the activation button. Nothing. No light. No signal tone. Dead. Hart checked his own. Same result. They exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication that came from years of operating together. Coincidence? Mitchell asked, though his tone made clear he didn't believe it. 3 beacons? All dead? Carson shook his head. Someone doesn't want us found. They'd moved quickly then, heading for the rendezvous point 2 miles north. That's when the first shot rang out. The bullet hit Mitchell in the thigh, spinning him around and dropping him into the snow. Carson and Hart reacted instantly, dragging their teammate behind a boulder as more shots chipped ice and stone around them. Contact rear, Hart shouted, his training taking over. 4, maybe 5 shooters. But they had no weapons. This was supposed to be a survival exercise, not a combat operation. They were defenseless. The attackers knew it. 4 men in white tactical gear emerged from the tree line, faces covered by balaclavas, weapons raised. Professional, efficient, merciless. Don't move, the lead attacker commanded. Hands where we can see them. Hart and Carson complied slowly, their minds racing through options. Mitchell lay groaning in the snow, blood spreading from his leg wound. On your knees. Hands behind your heads. They knelt. Zip ties bit into their wrists, pulled painfully tight. One of the attackers kicked Hart in the spine, sending him face first into the snow. This is how it ends, heroes, the lead attacker said, Lost in a blizzard. Tragic accident. Your families will get medals and closed caskets." "Who sent you?" Carson demanded. "Drummond?" The attackers exchanged glances. That answered the question. "Doesn't matter," the lead man said. "You three asked too many questions. Now you get to think about that while you freeze to death." They stripped the SEALs of their cold weather gear. Jackets, gloves, hats, thermal layers. They took their packs, their equipment, anything that might help them survive. Then they dragged the three men to the ravine and left them there, bound and helpless. "The storm's getting worse," one attacker noted. "They won't last 2 hours. Make sure. Wait until they're gone, then extract. We can't risk them being found alive." The men took up positions in the trees, watching from a distance as the storm intensified. They saw the 3 SEALs struggle against their bonds, saw them huddle together for warmth, saw them slowly succumb to hypothermia. They saw the moment all 3 stopped moving. "They're done," the lead man said, checking his watch. "Call it in." 3 Kia. What they didn't see was the small heat signatures approaching from the east. A girl and a dog, drawn by Ghost's inexplicable instinct toward men who needed help. By the time the attackers realized someone had found the bodies, they were long gone, and Emma was already building her desperate snow shelter. Emma didn't know she was being watched. She worked frantically, her small hands red and raw from the cold as she packed snow around the 3 SEALs. Her breath came in harsh gasps, her body shaking violently from hypothermia setting in. She'd given away all her warm clothing, and now the storm was taking its toll. Ghost suddenly stiffened, a low growl rumbling in his chest. His ears flattened against his skull, his lips pulled back to reveal white fangs. Emma froze, her heart hammering. "What is it, boy?" She turned slowly and saw them. 4 figures in white tactical gear, barely visible against the snow, weapons raised. "Well, what do we have here?" The lead man's voice was muffled behind his balaclava. "A little girl playing rescue." Emma instinctively placed herself between the men and the 3 SEALs. "Stay back." The men laughed. "Brave kid. But you should have stayed in town. Now you're just another loose end." Ghost launched himself forward with no warning, a white blur of teeth and fury. He hit the nearest attacker chest high, his weight and momentum sending the man crashing backward. The attacker's weapon discharged wildly, the shot going wide. "Ghost, no!" Emma screamed. But Ghost was in full attack mode, trained responses taking over. He went for the arm holding the weapon, jaws clamping down with bone-crushing force. The man screamed, and the rifle fell into the snow. The lead attacker raised his weapon, aiming at the dog. Stupid. Emma did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed a handful of snow and ice and threw it at the man's face, then dove for the fallen rifle. Her fingers closed around cold metal. She'd never held a gun before, had no idea how to use it, but she lifted it anyway, the barrel wavering as she pointed it in the general direction of the attackers. "Leave them alone." Her voice cracked with fear and cold, but there was steel underneath. The men hesitated. A child with a weapon was unpredictable, dangerous, in ways a trained soldier wasn't. That moment of hesitation was all Ghost needed. He released the first man and lunged for the second, driving him backward into the third. They went down in a tangle of limbs and weapons, cursing and struggling in the deep snow. The lead man kept his weapon trained on Emma. "Drop it, little girl. You don't want to do something stupid." Emma's arms shook with the weight of the rifle, her vision blurred with tears. "Please, they're dying. Just leave us alone." "Can't do that. Orders are orders." The crack of a gunshot split the air, but it didn't come from Emma's rifle or the attacker's weapon. It came from behind the attackers, from the tree line, followed immediately by a voice that carried absolute authority. "Federal agents, drop your weapons, hands in the air, now." The voice belonged to Special Agent Rebecca Beck Dalton of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. She was 38 years old, with sharp features, dark hair pulled into a tactical braid, and eyes that missed nothing. Behind her stood 3 more NCIS agents, weapons drawn, fanned out in professional formation. Beck had been investigating the financial irregularities at Pine Ridge Naval Warfare Training Facility for 6 months. When 3 SEALs suddenly got orders for a cold-weather survival exercise in the middle of a record-breaking blizzard, her instincts had screamed trap. She'd followed them, and now she'd found them. The 4 contractors froze, calculating odds. 4 against 4, but the NCIS agents had the high ground and proper cover. Plus, there was a kid in the crossfire. "I said drop them." Beck's voice cracked like a whip. The lead contractor slowly lowered his weapon, letting it fall into the snow. His team followed suit, hands rising, face down, hands behind your heads. They complied, knowing when they were beaten. Beck's team moved in quickly, securing the contractors with zip ties and checking them for additional weapons. Beck herself approached Emma, who still held the rifle in trembling hands. The agent knelt slowly, her movements careful and non-threatening. "Hey there, sweetheart," Beck said gently. "I'm Rebecca. I'm one of the good guys. You can put the gun down now. You're safe." Emma's arms finally gave out, the rifle dropping into the snow. She collapsed forward, and Beck caught her, pulling the shivering child against her chest. "I've got you," Beck murmured, already stripping off her own thermal jacket and wrapping it around Emma. "You did so good. You saved them. You hear me? You're a hero." Emma couldn't speak. Her teeth chattered too violently, her body shutting down from cold and shock. Beck looked up at her team. "Rodriguez, get the emergency shelter up now. We've got multiple hypothermia victims, including a child. Patterson, radio for immediate medevac. Tell them we need it 10 minutes ago." "Storm's too bad for helicopters," Patterson called back. "Then get me ground transport. Snowcats, anything that can move in this." Beck's eyes blazed. "These people are not dying on my watch." Ghost, his white fur stained with blood from the attacker he'd taken down, limped over to Emma. Beck saw the dog's protective stance and made no move to separate them. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible true stories of courage and loyalty. Within minutes, Beck's team had erected an emergency shelter, a military-grade tent with a portable heater inside. They moved Emma and the 3 SEALs, carefully, treating them for hypothermia, with thermal blankets, warm fluids, and constant monitoring. Beck examined each SEAL, her training as a former combat medic coming back instinctively. She started with Mitchell, the most critically wounded. "Gunshot to the thigh, significant blood loss," she assessed, applying pressure to the wound. But the cold actually worked in his favor. Slowed the bleeding, reduced shock. She moved to Carson, checking his vitals. "Severe hypothermia, but strong pulse. He's fighting." Finally, Hart. When she touched his throat to check his pulse, his eyes snapped open. His hand shot up, faster than should have been possible for someone in his condition, and locked around her wrist. "Easy, Lieutenant," Beck said calmly. "I'm NCIS. You're safe." Hart's eyes, those storm-gray eyes, focused on her face. Recognition flickered. "Agent Dalton?" "That's right. We've been looking for you boys." "Drummond," Hart rasped. "Morrison. They set us up." "I know. We know. And they're going to pay for it." Beck's voice was iron. "But right now, you need to focus on staying alive. Can you do that for me, Lieutenant?" Hart's gaze shifted past her to where Emma lay huddled under thermal blankets, Ghost pressed against her side. "The girl is the reason you're alive. She found you, gave you her coat, built you shelter, and stood between you and 4 armed contractors." Beck's voice softened. "She's 10 years old, and she's got more courage than most soldiers I've known." Hart's throat worked. "Her name? Emma. Emma Grace Shepard. Something shifted in Hart's expression. "Shepard," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. "Mark Shepard's daughter?" Beck's eyes widened. "You knew her father?" "Served with him in Fallujah, 2019. Hart's breathing was labored. "He saved my life. Pulled out of a burning Humvee. Got himself killed doing it." The pieces clicked together for Beck. Mark Shepard, Navy SEAL, killed in action 4 years ago. His widow had died in a house fire 8 months later, leaving their daughter orphaned. The girl who just saved 3 SEALs had lost her father, who'd been a SEAL himself. The circle of sacrifice and honor continuing across generations. "She's one of yours," Beck said quietly. "The tribe takes care of its own, Lieutenant. Remember that when you get out of here." Hart managed a nod before his eyes closed again, exhaustion claiming him. Outside, the storm began to break. The snow thinned, the wind eased, and in the distance came the distinctive rumble of snowcat engines. The cavalry had arrived. The next 12 hours were chaos. Emma and the 3 SEALs were transported to Pine Ridge Regional Medical Center, where a trauma team waited. Mitchell was rushed into emergency surgery. Carson and Hart were treated for severe hypothermia, frostbite, and various injuries. Emma, despite being the smallest and most vulnerable, fought the doctors every step of the way. "I need to stay with Ghost," she insisted through chattering teeth. "He saved me. I promised I wouldn't leave him." A veterinarian had been called to treat Ghost's injuries: lacerations from the fight, severe paw pad damage from running through snow and ice, and early-stage hypothermia. The dog had given everything to protect Emma and find help. "The dog needs treatment too," the ER doctor said patiently. "He'll be taken care of. I won't leave him." Emma's voice rose to a shout, tears streaming. "Everyone leaves. Everyone dies. I won't let him die alone." The commotion drew Agent Beck, who'd been coordinating with local law enforcement. She took one look at Emma's face and made a command decision. "Bring the dog's treatment in here," she ordered. "They're a team. They stay together." The doctors started to protest, but Beck's expression brooked no argument. 20 minutes later, Emma lay on a hospital bed with warm blankets and an IV drip, while Ghost received treatment on a mat on the floor beside her. Emma's hand dangled over the side of the bed, fingers tangled in Ghost's fur. Both of them finally slept. While they rested, Beck made the arrests that would shake the military establishment to its core. Commander Jack Morrison was taken into custody in his office at the training facility. He didn't resist. The weight of what he'd done had been crushing him since the moment he agreed to the plan. When Beck read him his rights, he simply nodded. "The girl," Morrison said quietly. "Is she okay?" "No thanks to you," Beck replied coldly. 3 good men nearly died. A 10-year-old child nearly froze to death. All because you chose money over honor." Morrison's face crumbled. I told myself it was for the unit. The funding, the equipment. I convinced myself the ends justified the means. They never do, Beck said. You of all people should have known that. Congressman Walter Drummond was arrested at his Georgetown townhouse at 4 a.m. He was in silk pajamas, his face slack with shock when FBI agents surrounded his bed. Unlike Morrison, he immediately lawyered up, refusing to say a word. But Beck had 6 months of evidence. Financial records, recorded phone calls, testimony from Morrison, and statements from the 4 contractors who'd been promised immunity for cooperation. Drummond's carefully constructed empire of corruption was collapsing like a house of cards. The news broke 48 hours later. National headlines screamed the story. Navy SEALs left to die in blizzard. Corruption scandal rocks military, and 10-year-old girl saves. 3 Navy SEALs in heroic rescue. Pine Ridge Regional Medical Center was besieged by media. Security had to be tripled to keep reporters away from the patients. Emma woke on the 3rd day to find Agent Beck sitting beside her bed, a familiar-looking man in a wheelchair beside her. Lieutenant Dylan Hart looked rough. His face was still pale, dark circles under those gray eyes, one hand wrapped in bandages from frostbite damage. But he was awake, alert, and when Emma's eyes opened, he smiled. "Hey there, warrior," he said, his voice still horsey, but stronger than it had been in the snow. "Heard you've been asking about us stubborn seals who refuse to die." Emma sat up slowly. Ghost, lying on a dog bed beside her, lifted his head but didn't move, still recovering from his own ordeal. "You're okay," Emma whispered. "All of you?" "Thanks to you," Hart said. He wheeled closer. "Emma, I need to tell you something. About your dad." Emma's eyes widened. "You knew him?" "Mark Shepard was my team leader for 2 years. One of the best men I ever served with." Hart's voice grew thick. "In 2019, our convoy hit an IED in Fallujah. My Humvee caught fire. I was trapped, unconscious. Your dad crawled into that burning vehicle and pulled me out. He went back for the driver, but the fuel tank exploded before he could get clear." Emma's breath hitched. She'd known. Her father died in combat, but she'd never known the details. Her mother had said it was too painful to talk about. "He saved your life," Emma said softly. "He gave me his life," Hart corrected. "And I've spent the last 4 years trying to figure out how to repay that debt, trying to be worthy of his sacrifice." His gray eyes locked with hers. "And then you saved mine. Shepard's daughter saved me again. That's not coincidence, Emma. I don't even know what to call it." "Fate," Agent Beck said quietly. "Or grace. The tribe takes care of its own." Hart nodded. "Emma, the military has support programs for families of fallen service members, but I'm not talking about bureaucracy. I'm talking about family, real family." Emma's heart began to pound. "What do you mean?" Hart glanced at Beck, who nodded encouragingly. He took a deep breath. "My wife, Sarah, and we've been trying to have kids for years. Wasn't meant to be. But," he paused, his voice breaking slightly, "your dad gave me a second chance at life. Let me give you a second chance at a family. Come live with us, Emma. Let us be the family you deserve." Emma stared at him, unable to process the words. After 8 months of foster care, of temporary placements, of being nobody's daughter, someone was offering her a home, not just someone. The man her father had died saving. I can't." She couldn't form complete sentences. "You don't have to decide right now," Hart said gently. "But Sarah's here. She flew in yesterday. She wants to meet you. And there's someone else who's been waiting." He gestured toward the door. 2 more wheelchairs rolled in, pushed by nurses. Carson and Mitchell, both looking like hell, but grinning like fools. "Ma'am," Mitchell said solemnly to Emma, "Chief Petty Officer Marcus Carson and myself would like to formally request permission to be your uncles. We understand this is a significant promotion for us, but we believe we're qualified." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "My uncles?" "Hart gets the honor of Dad," Carson said, "but we call dibs on the uncle slots. Someone's got to teach you all the fun stuff your dad would have taught you. Tactical operations, hand-to-hand combat, how to hotwire a snowmobile." "They're joking about most of that," Hart interjected quickly, though he was smiling. "Mostly joking," Mitchell amended. Emma looked at the 3 SEALs, these warriors who'd survived death in the snow, who were offering her something she'd thought was lost forever: family. And not just any family, but her father's brothers, the men who'd fought beside him, who'd loved him, who would now love her. "Can Ghost come too?" she asked, her voice small. All 3 men looked at the white German shepherd, whose blue eyes watched them with an intensity that suggested he understood every word. "Ghost is a damned hero," Hart said firmly. "He's not just invited, he's expected. Every SEAL family needs a good dog. And Ghost," he reached down to scratch behind the dog's ears, "Ghost is one of us now." Ghost's tail thumped once against the floor. Emma dissolved into tears, and Hart wheeled forward to pull her into his arms. She clung to him, 8 months of fear and loneliness pouring out in great, heaving sobs. Hart held her tight, his own eyes wet. "You're home now, warrior," he murmured. "You're home." The next weeks were a blur of bureaucracy and healing. Social services fast-tracked Emma's placement with Dylan and Sarah Hart, especially given the extraordinary circumstances. The fact that Hart was a decorated Navy SEAL with a spotless record didn't hurt. Sarah Hart turned out to be everything Emma had hoped for. She was 36, a high school English teacher with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She'd lost her own mother young and understood the shape of Emma's grief. When they first met, Sarah simply held out her arms, and Emma walked into them. "I don't have the words yet," Sarah said softly, "but we'll find them together." Mitchell and Carson were constant visitors, making good on their uncle promises. They taught Emma card games and told terrible jokes and shared stories about her father that made him real again in ways the faded photograph never could. "Your dad once bet a month's pay he could eat 50 jalapenos in 10 minutes, Carson told her, grinning. Man won the bet, then spent the next 3 days regretting every life choice that led to that moment. Emma laughed, really laughed, for the first time in 8 months. Ghost recovered faster than the humans, his resilience and training serving him well. The veterinarian who'd treated him discovered something interesting during his examination. Ghost had a microchip traced back to a Navy CNUEVE training program. He'd been a military working dog, trained for cold weather search and rescue. He washed out of the program, the vet explained. Too aggressive toward handler candidates. They couldn't break him of his protective instincts. But those same instincts made him perfect for Emma. Not aggressive, Emma corrected quietly. Loyal. He just hadn't found his person yet. The tribunal for Morrison and Drummond was swift and brutal. The military court-martial found Commander Morrison guilty on all charges. He was dishonorably discharged, stripped of his rank and pension, and sentenced to 20 years in Fort Leavenworth. Congressman Drummond faced federal charges. His trial would take longer, but the evidence was overwhelming. He'd embezzled millions, ordered the deaths of 3 military personnel, and endangered a child. Federal prosecutors were seeking life without parole. But the real victory wasn't in the courtrooms. It was in the hospital room where Emma sat with her new family, Ghost at her feet, learning what it meant to belong again. Agent Beck stood in the NCIS conference room, walls covered with evidence boards. Red string-connected photographs, financial documents, and timeline markers. What had started as a simple embezzlement investigation had uncovered something far darker. "We've got a problem," she said to her team. Morrison and Drummond weren't working alone. On the screen behind her, a dozen faces appeared. High-ranking officers, defense contractors, even a Deputy Secretary of Defense, all connected to the Pine Ridge facility, all benefiting from the illegal funding stream. The training facility was a front, Beck's tech analyst Rodriguez explained, pulling up financial records. Drummond funneled federal defense appropriations through Pine Ridge, skimmed 30% off the top, and distributed it to this network. In exchange, they approved contracts for his donors, expedited security clearances, and buried oversight reports. "How much are we talking?" Beck's supervisor, Director James Walsh, leaned forward. "Conservative estimate? $200 million over 5 years. The room went silent. This wasn't just corruption, this was systematic betrayal at the highest levels of military and government. Hart, Carson, and Mitchell stumbled onto a fragment of this, Beck continued. They were compiling evidence of financial irregularities in their unit's budget. They didn't realize they were pulling on a thread that would unravel everything. "So Drummond ordered them killed," Walsh said grimly. "How far up does this go?" Beck pulled up another file. "The Deputy Secretary knew. We've got emails. He authorized additional resources for special projects at Pine Ridge. That's code for assassination contractors. Mother of God." Walsh ran a hand over his face. "If we take this public, it'll be the biggest military scandal since Tailhook. If we don't," Beck countered, "these people keep operating. How many more SEALs die? How many more kids like Emma end up orphaned because some politician wanted a bigger yacht? Walsh met her eyes. What do you need? Full task force. FBI, DOD Inspector General, congressional oversight. And I want protection for Hart, Carson, Mitchell, and Emma. They're the key witnesses. These people have already tried to kill them once. Done. As of now, this is Operation Shepherd's Watch. Walsh's voice was steel. We bring down every last one of them. Over the next 3 weeks, the task force worked in secret. Wiretaps captured conversations. Financial forensics traced every dollar. Witnesses were interviewed. Immunity deals offered to lower-level conspirators in exchange for testimony against the bigger fish. The investigation's scope was staggering. The conspiracy touched 3 military branches, 5 defense contractors, and reached into the Senate Armed Services Committee itself. These were powerful people accustomed to getting their way, to being untouchable. They were about to learn otherwise. Hart, meanwhile, was dealing with his own form of justice. Physical therapy was brutal, pushing his frost-damaged body back toward SEAL fitness standards. But he pushed through, driven by the knowledge that Emma was watching. You don't have to do this, Sarah told him one night as he struggled through exercises in their living room. You've given enough. I'm not doing it to go back to active duty, Hart replied, grimacing through the pain. I'm doing it so Emma knows that when life knocks you down, you get back up. She needs to see that. Emma, in fact, was watching from the stairs. She'd been doing that a lot lately, observing her new family, still half convinced it might all disappear like a dream. Ghost lay beside her, his head on her knee. The dog had become her constant shadow, following her from room to room, sleeping beside her bed, his presence a reassurance that she wasn't alone. Sarah noticed Emma on the stairs. Come down here, sweetheart. Help me make sure your dad doesn't overdo it. Emma's heart still stuttered at that word. Dad. But she descended the stairs and positioned herself as Hart's spotter, just like Sarah had taught her. 20 more reps, Hart grunted, pushing through bicep curls. That's too many, Emma said firmly. Sarah said 15. Sarah's not a SEAL. Sarah's smarter than you, Emma countered, and Sarah burst out laughing. Hart grinned through the pain. Kid's got a point. These moments, small and domestic, were rebuilding Emma piece by piece. Family wasn't just about blood or adoption papers. It was about showing up, about being present, about choosing each other every single day. Beck's task force moved with surgical precision. They started with the contractors, the men who'd been hired to kill Hart, Carson, and Mitchell. Under immunity deals, they sang like canaries. Drummond ordered the hit. The lead contractor testified. Said it had to look like an accident. Gave us $500,000 up front, another $500,000 on completion. Who authorized the payment? The contractor slid a document across the table. Bank transfer authorization signed by Deputy Secretary of Defense Robert Hartwell. Beck allowed herself a small smile. They had him. But Hartwell was just one piece. The task force built their case against all 12 conspirators simultaneously, ensuring none of them had warning to flee or destroy evidence. They coordinated with international partners. Several conspirators had offshore accounts. Those were frozen. Private contractors tried to intimidate witnesses. Those contractors found themselves arrested on unrelated charges. The net was closing. Hart, Carson, and Mitchell were kept informed. They'd earned that right. And more importantly, they had critical testimony to provide. They'd seen the financial records, understood the operational implications. They were the prosecution's star witnesses. This goes to trial, Beck warned them. You're going to be targets again. The people we're going after have resources. They'll come at you through lawyers, through the media, maybe through force. Let them try, Mitchell said flatly. All 3 SEALs were recovering well, though Carson still needed a cane, and Mitchell would walk with a permanent limp from his gunshot wound. We've already died once. We're not afraid. I am, Hart said quietly. Not for us. For Emma. That was the real concern. Emma was a witness too. She'd seen the contractors, could identify them. More importantly, she'd become a symbol, a living reminder of the corruption and its costs. The conspirators needed her silenced. Beck had anticipated this. Emma, Sarah, and Ghost were placed under 24-hour protection. Federal marshals rotated shifts, maintaining constant surveillance. The Hart house became a fortress. Emma hated it. She was a 10-year-old who'd learned to move freely, to trust her instincts and Ghost's senses. Being cooped up with guards, watching her every move, felt like prison. "I know it's hard," Sarah told her, "but it's temporary, once the trials are over." "Will it ever really be over?" Emma interrupted. "These people wanted Dylan and Marcus and James dead. They'll always be out there." Sarah had no answer for that. Because Emma was right. Some enemies didn't disappear with prison sentences. That night, Emma woke from a nightmare, gasping and shaking. Ghost immediately pressed against her, his warm presence grounding her. But it wasn't enough. She padded down the hall to the master bedroom and stood in the doorway. "Emma?" Hart was instantly awake, a seal's light sleep detecting the change in the house. "What's wrong?" "I dreamed about the snow," she whispered. "About finding you. But in the dream, I was too late." Hart threw back the covers. "Come here." Emma climbed into the bed between Hart and Sarah. Ghost jumped up after her, curling at their feet. Sarah wrapped an arm around Emma while Hart stroked her hair. "You weren't too late," Hart said firmly. "You saved us. You're the bravest person I've ever known, Emma. And that includes every SEAL I've served with. But what if they come back? What if?" "Then we'll handle it," Sarah said. "Together. That's what families do. We face the hard things together." Emma fell asleep between them, Ghost's steady breathing and Hart's heartbeat mixing with Sarah's gentle humming. For the first time since the snow, she felt truly safe. The arrests came at dawn, synchronized across 4 states and Washington, D.C. FBI and NCIS agents executed warrants simultaneously, ensuring no conspirator could warn the others. Deputy Secretary Robert Hartwell was arrested in his Arlington mansion. General Theodore Vance, former commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, was taken into custody at the Pentagon. 4 contractors, 2 senators, and 3 defense industry executives were all arrested within the same hour. The media coverage was explosive. News networks ran 24-hour coverage. Social media erupted. The hashtag Shepherd's Watch trended worldwide. At the center of it all was Emma's story, the little girl who saved 3 Navy SEALs. The orphan who'd lost everything but still found the courage to help others. She became America's daughter, a symbol of innocence and heroism. Hart hated it. "She's not a symbol," he told Beck angrily. "She's a child who's been through hell. Let her be a kid." "I'm trying," Beck said. "But the public needs heroes right now. They need to believe good still exists. Then they can look at the SEALs. Leave Emma out of it." But Emma couldn't be left out. She was too central to the story. And when Congressman Drummond's defense team tried to paint her as an unreliable witness, a traumatized child with faulty memories, Emma herself demanded to testify. "They're saying, I didn't see what I saw," she told Hart. "That I don't remember. But I do. I remember everything." The prosecution initially resisted. Putting a child on the stand was risky. Defense attorneys could be brutal in cross-examination. But Emma was adamant. "My dad died fighting bad guys," she said. "I can fight them too, just different." The courtroom was packed the day Emma testified. Hart and Sarah sat in the front row, Ghost at their feet. Carson and Mitchell were there too, in dress uniforms, a show of support and a reminder of who Emma had saved. Emma wore a simple blue dress Sarah had bought for her, her blonde hair neatly braided. She looked impossibly small in the witness chair. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Castellanos, approached gently. "Emma, can you tell us what you saw on the night of February 14th? Emma's voice was steady. She described following Ghost into the storm, finding the 3 SEALs, building the snow shelter. She described the men in white tactical gear who'd tried to kill them. "Can you identify anyone in this courtroom who was present that night?" Castellanos asked. Emma's gaze swept the defense table and stopped on one of the contractors. "Him, he was the leader," he said. She paused, remembering. He said they were loose ends. That we were all just loose ends to be cleaned up. The contractor's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection! The witness is 10 years old. Her testimony is more credible than your client's," the judge interrupted icily. Judge Margaret Thornton was 72, a former Navy JAG officer herself. "Sit down, counsel." The cross-examination was brutal. Drummond's lawyer, a slick corporate attorney named Harrison Weeks, tried to shake Emma's testimony. "Emma, isn't it true you were suffering from hypothermia during these events?" "Yes, sir." "And hypothermia can cause confusion? False memories?" "I guess so, sir." "So you can't be certain?" "I'm certain," Emma interrupted, her voice firm. "I'm certain because I was there. Because I was so cold I thought I'd die. Because Ghost fought those men and got hurt protecting me. Because Dylan and Marcus and James would have died if we hadn't found them." Her eyes locked on Weeks. "I'm certain because I remember every second. And no amount of you asking me the same question different ways is going to change what I saw." The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Thornton allowed it for a moment before gaveling for order. "The witness is excused," she said, her voice warm. "Thank you, Emma. Your courage honors this court." Emma climbed down and walked straight to Hart, who pulled her into his arms. Ghost pressed against their legs, tail wagging. "You did it, warrior," Hart whispered. "Your dad would be so proud." The trials lasted 3 months. One by one, the conspirators fell. The contractors were convicted of attempted murder and conspiracy, 25 years to life. Congressman Drummond was found guilty on all counts. Corruption, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, life without parole. Deputy Secretary Hartwell got 30 years. General Vance got 20. Commander Morrison, who'd cooperated fully with prosecutors, received a redo sentence of 15 years. But he'd lost everything that mattered: his rank, his reputation, his honor. Beck watched the final verdict from the gallery. Operation Shepherd's Watch had been the biggest military corruption case in U.S. history. Dozens of officials had been implicated, hundreds of millions recovered, and systemic reforms were already being implemented. But the real victory, she thought, looking at Emma sitting between her parents, Ghost at her feet, was much simpler. A little girl had her family back. 3 SEALs had their lives back. And justice, real justice, had prevailed. 6 months after the final conviction, the Hart family stood on the steps of the Naval Memorial in Washington, D.C. It was a crisp autumn day, leaves turning gold and crimson, the air carrying the first hint of winter. Emma wore a dark blue dress, her hair longer now, healthy and shining. She held Sarah's hand on one side, Hart's on the other. Ghost sat at attention beside them, a service vest on his back, marking him as a working dog. Behind them stood Carson and Mitchell, both in dress whites, their chests covered in ribbons and medals. Beck was there too, along with her entire team. And spread across the memorial grounds were hundreds more. Navy SEALs, past and present, who'd come to honor their fallen brother Mark Shepard and celebrate the daughter who'd carried on his legacy. The ceremony began with a rifle salute. The sharp crack of the shots made Emma flinch, but Hart's hand tightened reassuringly on hers. "I've got you," he murmured. Admiral Richard Stockdale, Chief of Naval Operations, approached the microphone. He was in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, his uniform immaculate. 4 years ago, he began, we lost a hero. Lieutenant Mark Shepard gave his life saving his teammates in Fallujah. He exemplified the Navy SEAL ethos. I will never quit. I persevere and thrive on adversity. My nation expects me to be physically harder and mentally stronger than my enemies. If knocked down, I will get back up, every time. The Admiral paused, his gaze finding Emma. Lieutenant Shepard's daughter, proved herself his equal. At 10 years old, Emma Grace Shepard demonstrated courage and selflessness that would be extraordinary in a seasoned warrior. She saved 3 Navy SEALs, stood against armed killers, and helped bring down a conspiracy that threatened the integrity of our military. He gestured Emma forward. She hesitated, but Sarah gently nudged her. Emma walked to the podium, Ghost at her side. Admiral Stockdale knelt to her level. "Emma, on behalf of a grateful nation and the Naval Special Warfare community, I present you with the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for Heroism." He opened a velvet case, revealing a medal suspended from a dark blue ribbon. "This is our highest non-combat award for heroism. You've earned it." Emma's eyes filled with tears as the Admiral pinned the medal to her dress. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. "No, Emma, thank you." The Admiral stood and saluted her, a sign of respect that made the entire assembly of SEALs salute as well. Emma, uncertain, returned the salute, as Hart had taught her. The crowd erupted in applause. But the ceremony wasn't over. Admiral Stockdale turned to Ghost. "This dog," he said, his voice carrying, displayed exceptional courage and loyalty. He located the victims, defended them against armed assailants, and sustained injuries protecting Emma Shepard. The U.S. Navy recognizes his service. A handler brought forward a special collar, leather with metal plates, engraved with commendations. It was traditionally given to military working dogs who'd served with distinction. "Ghost," the Admiral said formally, "you are hereby recognized as an honorary member of the Naval Special Warfare KNUVI unit. You will receive full veteran benefits, including medical care for life." Ghost, as if understanding the gravity of the moment, sat perfectly still as the collar was fitted. Then his tail began to wag, thumping against the memorial steps. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even the Admiral smiled. After the ceremony, Emma stood with Hart, Carson, and Mitchell at the memorial wall, where her father's name was engraved among thousands of others who'd given their lives in service. "He would have loved Ghost," Emma said softly, tracing her father's name with her finger. "Your dad would have loved everything about who you've become," Hart replied. "He'd be so proud, Emma. We all are." Mitchell knelt beside her. "Your dad used to say that the measure of a warrior isn't how hard they can hit, but how many times they can get hit and keep moving forward. You've been hit hard, kiddo. Harder than most people ever face. But you kept moving forward." "We all did," Emma said. "Together," Carson grinned. "Damn right. Shepherds and their pack. That's what we are now." As the sun set over the memorial, casting long shadows across the names of the fallen, Emma felt something shift inside her. Not healing, she'd always carry the scars of losing her parents, but acceptance. Understanding that her father's sacrifice had meaning, that his legacy lived on, through her, and through the men he'd saved. "Dad," she whispered to the engraved name, "I'm okay now. I found a new family, but I'll never forget you. I promise." Ghost pressed against her leg, and Emma smiled through her tears. The Hart house in Virginia Beach had transformed over 6 months. What had been a neat but sterile home for 2 adults now showed signs of life. Emma's drawings on the refrigerator, Ghost's toys scattered across the living room, muddy boots by the door from family hikes. Sarah had quit her teaching job to homeschool Emma, at least temporarily. The media attention had made regular school impossible. Plus, Emma's trauma needed time to heal, and the flexibility of homeschooling gave them that space. Hart had retired from active duty. The frostbite damage to his hands meant he'd never regain full dexterity, which disqualified him from SEAL operations. But he'd taken a position training new recruits at Little Creek, passing on his knowledge to the next generation. Carson and Mitchell visited often, checking in on their niece, though everyone knew they came as much for Sarah's cooking and the chance to roughhouse with Ghost as for Emma. On a Saturday in November, the whole crew gathered for what had become a weekly tradition, family dinner. Sarah cooked her famous lasagna, while Emma helped, learning to measure ingredients and follow recipes. Hart manned the grill outside, despite the cold, insisting that steaks were non-negotiable. Carson and Mitchell arrived together, arms full of groceries and gifts they pretended were necessities but were really just spoiling Emma. "It's not spoiling," Carson argued when Sarah called him out. "It's tactical resource allocation. You bought her a drone," Sarah countered. "A educational drone, for learning about drone things." Emma giggled, accepting the box eagerly. Ghost supervised from his position by the fireplace, having learned that dinner preparation usually resulted in dropped food. As the afternoon wore into evening, they gathered around the table. It was cramped. The table only seated 6 comfortably, and with 5 adults, 1 kid, and a large German shepherd trying to sit on Emma's feet, it was cozy bordering on chaotic. But it was perfect. "I propose a toast," Mitchell said, raising his glass. "To the Shepherd family, old and new." Glasses clinked. Emma raised her juice box with exaggerated seriousness, making everyone laugh. "To the tribe," Hart added. "The people who show up when it matters." "To courage," Sarah said, her eyes on Emma. "And to second chances." "To Ghost," Carson added. "Best wingman a seal could ask for." Ghost's tail thumped in agreement. Emma looked around the table at these people who'd chosen to be her family, who'd shown her that love wasn't just about blood, but about showing up, about choosing each other every day despite the hardness of life. "To home," Emma said softly. "Thank you for giving me one." Later, after dinner was cleared and Carson and Mitchell had left, Emma sat with Hart on the back porch. The night was cold but clear, stars brilliant overhead. Ghost lay between them, his breathing steady and calm. "Dylan?" Emma said. She'd started calling him Dad most of the time, but sometimes in serious moments she still used his name. "Do you think my dad knows about all this?" Hart considered the question carefully. "I don't know how it works, Emma, but I'd like to think he does. I'd like to think he's watching over you, proud of how strong you've become. Sometimes I'm scared I'll forget him," Emma admitted. His voice, the way he laughed, "It's getting harder to remember." "That's why we tell stories," Hart said. "Carson and Mitchell and I will tell you every story we remember about your dad. We'll keep him alive in our memories together." Emma nodded, leaning against Hart's side. "Will you tell me one now?" Hart smiled. "Your dad had this thing he'd do before every mission. He'd tap his chest twice, right over his heart, then point up at the sky. His good luck ritual. One time, we were in this God-forsaken desert, about to jump out of a helicopter into a hot LZ. Your dad does his ritual, and this new guy asks what it means." "What did he say?" Emma asked. "Your dad said, 1 tap for my girl back home, 1 tap for my daughter. And pointing up means I'm coming back to them no matter what." He always came back, Emma, every mission, until the one time he stayed to make sure I could come back instead. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. He was protecting his tribe. "That's exactly right. And now you're protecting us. Same blood, same honor." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars wheel overhead. Ghost stirred occasionally, checking on them both. His protective instincts never fully relaxed. "Dylan," Emma said again. "Yeah, warrior. I love you. And Sarah. And Marcus and James and Ghost and this whole crazy family." Hart pulled her close. "We love you too, Emma. More than you'll ever know." Spring came to Virginia Beach, with gentle warmth and the scent of ocean salt. The Hart family had settled into their new normal. School, training, family dinners, and the occasional PTSD nightmare that required middle-of-the-night reassurance. Emma was thriving. She'd gained weight, grown 2 inches, and her smile came more easily now. She'd started making friends at a homeschool co-op. Sarah had found, though she was selective about who she trusted, Ghost attended every co-op day, having become something of a mascot for the group. Beck visited one afternoon, bringing news. The last appeal was denied. She told Hart and Sarah while Emma played with Ghost in the yard. "Drummond will die in prison. Hart will too, probably. It's over." "It's never really over," Hart said, "but this chapter is closed." Beck nodded. "There's something else. The Navy wants to do a documentary about Operation Shepherd's Watch, the corruption case, and Emma's rescue. They want you all to participate." Sarah frowned. "Emma's been through enough. We don't need to relive. I want to do it," Emma said from the doorway. They hadn't heard her come in. Ghost stood beside her, ever vigilant. "If it helps other kids know they can be brave, if it helps people understand why the military matters, I want to do it." Beck looked at Hart and Sarah. "She's wise beyond her years." "She's her father's daughter," Hart said simply. The documentary took 6 months to produce. It featured interviews with Emma, Hart, Carson, Mitchell, Beck, and dozens of others involved in the case. It showed the corruption, the rescue, the trials, and the aftermath. But more than that, it showed what heroism really looked like. Not the Hollywood version, but the real thing. A scared little girl who helped anyway. A dog who refused to give up. Warriors who protected the innocent, even at cost to themselves. A family that formed from shared trauma and chose love over bitterness. The documentary premiered on Veterans Day. Emma watched it with her family, curled between Hart and Sarah on the couch, Ghost's head in her lap. When it ended, Emma was crying. But they weren't sad tears. "That's us," she said wonderingly. "That's our story. That's your story, warrior," Hart corrected gently. "You're the heart of it." The documentary's final scene showed Emma at the Naval Memorial, touching her father's name on the wall. Her voice played over the image. "My dad used to tell me that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing what's right anyway. I was terrified in that storm. But Ghost needed me to be brave. Dylan and Marcus and James needed me to be brave. So I was." If you're watching this and you're scared about anything, remember that you're stronger than you think. Remember that helping others makes you strong, not weak. Remember that family isn't just who you're born to, but who chooses to stand beside you. And remember that heroes aren't perfect. They're just people who refuse to give up. The screen faded to black, then showed one final image. The Shepherd Hart family at dinner, laughing, Ghost's head popping up from under the table. A normal family, forged in extraordinary circumstances, choosing joy despite their scars. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes still exist. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments, what was your favorite moment? Was it Ghost's loyalty, Emma's courage, or the moment the SEALs became her family? We read every comment. God bless, and see you in the next story. Emma Grace Shepherd Hart stood at the edge of the Naval Academy's training field, now 15 years old, tall and athletic. Her blonde hair was pulled back in the same tactical braid Sarah had taught her years ago. Ghost, now 7 and graying around the muzzle, sat beside her in his service vest. She just completed a summer leadership program for children of fallen service members. Next year, she'd begin the academy application process. She wanted to be a SEAL, like her father, like Hart. People said women couldn't be SEALs. Emma planned to prove them wrong. Hart approached, still moving with a slight limp from old injuries, but strong and vital at 38. "Ready to head home, warrior?" Emma nodded, but paused, looking out over the water. "Dad, thank you." "For what?" "For keeping your promise, for being the family Dad wanted me to have." Hart's throat tightened. Even after 5 years, these moments still hit him. "Your father saved my life, Emma. Giving you a home, a family, it's not repaying a debt. It's an honor." Emma smiled. "That's the right answer." They walked to the parking lot together, Ghost between them. Sarah was waiting by the car, along with Carson and Mitchell, who'd driven up for Emma's graduation ceremony. As they piled into the SUV, bickering about where to eat dinner, Emma looked at her phone. The documentary had been viewed over 50 million times. She got messages daily from kids who'd been inspired by her story. She tried to answer as many as she could, always with the same message. You're braver than you know. Keep going. The tribe needs you. Because that was the real lesson of the blizzard, of the snow, and the fear, and the impossible odds. That ordinary people could do extraordinary things. That courage was contagious. That love real, chosen, earned love could heal wounds that seemed fatal. That family wasn't about blood, it was about showing up when it mattered most. And Emma Shepard Hart, the girl who'd saved 3 Navy SEALs and helped bring down a corrupt empire, had learned what her father knew all along. The most powerful force in the world isn't violence, or money, or power. It's the bond between people who refuse to give up on each other. It's loyalty, it's courage, it's love. That's what makes heroes. That's what saves lives. That's what changes the world, one frozen heart at a time. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder. They come quietly, in a child's compassion, in a dog's loyal heart, in warriors who refuse to surrender. In Pine Ridge, Montana, during the worst blizzard in 50 years, Grace walked on 4 legs and spoke with a 10-year-old's voice. If this story moved you, remember, you carry that same capacity for courage. When someone needs help, be the one who shows up. When the world is cold, be the warmth. When others have given up, be the one who refuses to quit. That's how we honor the Mark Shepards of the world. That's how we become the heroes our children need us to be. May God bless our service members, their families, and every person brave enough to help a stranger in need. You never know that stranger might just change your life.